is a meeting that we're going to have to discuss the homeless encampment and a couple of things that are going around in that neighborhood. And I'm really lucky that we have Judy Tackett, who's the director of the homeless for the social works. And we have Commander Corman and C. Sergeant Rutgers on. And then we have Dana Coleman from Water with the water project that's going to go on behind there. So just for everybody's information, this will be recorded and recognize Council Lady Hauser that happens to be on here too. So appreciate y'all coming. Sort of want to talk through sort of the format, and we have limited space. So we're going to talk through about 20 minutes with Ms. Tackett, with Commander Corman, and then Mr. Coleman with the water will another 5-10 minutes. Leaves us about 20 minutes for questions. If you'll just send them to and I will surface those questions as you talk about those toward the end. Is that everybody okay with that? And secondly, if you could keep everything on mute, otherwise we get some background music until we're ready. But again, sending your questions to chat will help a lot as we go through. Again, if there's any questions, please let us know. So let me start out by thanking Judy Tackett. I started getting involved and got to know her about 2 months ago. And to introduce her, she's an amazing lady. The homeless is a very difficult problem, and it's very complex. And she does amazing work. But I'll let her take off and sort of talk through and sort of give background to what's going on. So, Ms. Tackett, if you could go ahead and get started.
Yes, I just want to check. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Judy, we're good.
I apologize. I'm not using the camera due to technical issues. I will just, the sound will not be good. One of the things I just want to give, and that's Druffel for inviting me, and background and overview on homelessness and starting there. So one of the things that individually or being at meetings and heard some of this, one of the things that a community is working on is using designated for homelessness, and is in the process of coming to house as many people as possible. So first, looking at what COVID did to the homeless, pretty much all services when the provider agencies had to figure out how to safely continue serving people experiencing homelessness. And here are some examples. When, and I'm really going through numbers right now, when usually capacity at the shelter organization, the full capacity, they went to about half capacity. Metro opened a shelter to make up for and work with the community to continue providing a sufficient shelter space, which has worked really well, but that is a huge undertaking. So currently, Metro is running a shelter at the fairgrounds for individual men, a shelter at the municipal auditorium for women, and also at the fairgrounds has a space set up with input from the health department and to house people that have been receiving the COVID test and are waiting for results, or are COVID plus have tested positive, are not admitted to a hospital but need a safe space where they can isolate safely. And so that is going on right now. The community, the shelter provider is to stay, and yet and you see there's still a lot of street homelessness. So we have done a quick census with service providers and nonprofits in July, and we find, and these are so what is Metro doing? And more homelessness. And these are rounded numbers. So anybody who wants absolute details, I can provide those, but please contact me for that later on. So those dollars are funneled through, and these dollars come from the federal government to the local government via MDHA, the Metropolitan Development and Housing Agency, is managing those grants. The Emergency Solution Grant is a grant funded every year. Usually it's around $450,000. This infusion is $10 million. So that is about an increase in funding that's coming into our community to address homelessness. These dollars can be generally used. The eligibility is for some prevention funds, outreach, street outreach, shelter. Now, our community has had multiple conversations and focus groups. We have been actually awarded also from the federal government a consultant contract. We have a consultant that's working very these conversations with nonprofits. These funds are have to be applied for by nonprofit agencies. And these nonprofits, we have community meetings. The focus is really on getting people off the streets, out of shelters, getting people into housing. Roughly right now is how nonprofits are applying for that. The deadline for those applications is September 18, and then there is an award process through MDHA that they're setting up. The local community wants to focus on rapid rehousing and street outreach mainly, and that's really to seamlessly, the outreach is very important to help people remove some of the barriers to housing, for example, replacement of ID tickets and some other paperwork. With these federal grants, there's always complex paperwork and reporting requirements that each nonprofit has to fulfill and send to the federal government. So there's going to be an education process going on. So roughly, we hope though that the first programs will start up and by November, if not sooner. So it's a real big push. Usually these grants take way longer to go out. They're out in the community longer for people, for nonprofits. Everything is everybody's really pushing hard to get these dollars out. The goal, 400 plus people off the streets. That will make a huge dent rather quickly. Rapid rehousing really is focusing on getting people into 1-year leases and assistance with rent so that they can afford it, together coupled with support services. That is very important because the goal is not to get people off the street for 1 year. The goal is to work with people, link them with mainstream services and supports, and use that time to establish that capacity that they can pay the rent and are linked to services once the rapid rehousing steps away, because these are temporary housing funds. How people will need ongoing supports, and that's kind of these grants overall, these 10 million has to be spent down. Usually the time frame is within a 2-year frame. So it's, as you can imagine, it's not day one. Every program is up and running and 400 people are in housing the next day. One of the biggest urgencies that we have is to focus on landlord recruitment. As you all know, there is nationwide, and this is not just in Nashville, and nationwide, there is a lack of low-income affordable housing. And so it's very important that anybody, I get a lot of calls, for us to say, a lot of calls from your area, community neighbors that want to see how they can help. And one of the things that we need, any lead that you have, is, even if it's a mother-in-law apartment, somebody who needs to fill an apartment with, we're going to come in with the right supports. We're going to explain what's going on. There's not going to be any surprises. That's kind of where we as a community, I think, need to pull together to really make a difference. So in the encampments right now, we have 3 rather large encampments that are on the larger side, and the one out by Brookmid is one of those. Right now there are 40 to 50 people in that encampment, and it's changing, and people, the service providers, there's a group of service providers that have established relationships and know who's out there, and they're working with them towards housing, getting them ready to be in what we call a coordinated environment, to have a coordinated entry system and use this kind of process, coordinated entry process for these dollars. What that does is it prioritizes people based on the vulnerability that they have. It's really it's really looking at getting most vulnerable people rather than a first come first serve approach. It really looks at more vulnerability, and that helps to also prioritize people living outdoors, frankly. That is actually, I know I haven't used all the time. Me talking, it's sometimes a little weird to be on the computer in the Zoom calls. So yeah, I wanted to turn it over to whoever is next, and then we can go to Q&A soon.
Thanks so much, Judy. I know you got so much more. I had a chance to spend some time with Judy. She's an amazing encyclopedia on how to help the homeless, and is extremely dedicated. Sergeant Rucker, I see you are on the line. I know Commander Corman, I talked to him this morning. So are you, may I ask, ready to sort of touch base on some of the potential issues that might involve the police in any way?
Yes, sir. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. You know, this encampment that Ms. Judy spoke about causes quite a bit of a concern just from citizens. We hear from them, if not daily, at least multiple times a week. And, you know, their biggest concern is just and spending time just, you know, walking, exercising, biking, whatever, you know, their pleasure may be. On the other side, it's just calls for service. We're constantly down there dealing with just daily. So businesses continue to call for, police services due to just activities that happen over there. So we have our hands full, and certainly we want to work with any other resource we can to help resolve those problems.
Thanks, Sergeant. And again, if you have questions for Sergeant, sure, some people are having trouble getting in, so that's why I'm sort of trying to do two things at once here. I don't know why some are able to get in and some aren't, but anyhow. Again, open to sort of monitor the situation, and while we're still trying to make sure that we take good care of the people there, because it's a long-term plan to really help them in many ways. So there's a water project going on behind that. So let me introduce Dana Coleman. Happening on the water project right behind. Dana, you ready to go?
Ready. I'm actually Ron Taylor.
Oh, Ron Taylor. I thought I had Dana. Sorry about
I'm using Dana's computer just to be tricky, because her computer has a camera and mine doesn't.
Okay, sorry about that.
Probably none of you have heard of it. And we kind of joke it's the largest capital program in Nashville that nobody's ever heard of. It's a $1.5 billion program to improve water quality. And the reason we don't hear about it like these days, when you have something positive that you can reinvest in the infrastructure to improve the community, we don't, get a lot of airtime, which is something like. So you may not know that behind the Super 8 Motel on Charlotte, there's a small sewage pumping station that's pretty old and it's kind of hidden. We've got some pretty old pipes in your community. And when we get really heavy rains and the groundwater table rises above our pipes, those pipes leak. And when they leak, it can overwhelm the capacity of that sewage pumping station. And that excess diluted sewage then can enter the Department of Justice and others to make improvements in that infrastructure. And one of the projects that's really important to us is Davidson Branch. So we're going to replace that small pumping station with a 10-gallon circular concrete storage tank that we can then temporarily store those really high diluted flows in big wet weather events system so that it can't enter into Davidson Branch. So we think that's going to be an excellent project to improve the community. It's a long project. We're starting next week on construction. It's 2 years worth of construction. It's going to include 200, and we want to be extremely cautious that we're making a safe area for the homeless individuals that occupy that site, so we're not endangering health. Ultimately, we think that what we're doing is going to make an improvement in that. Out of that project, we worked with Metro Parks to look at layouts that could be conducive to future park programming, like, for example, a kayak and canoe launch area. So it's going to take a while to get the benefits of this investment, but I think it's the start of an improvement long-term in that site and the community.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, access to that area, how are you going to access that back area? Can you give us sort of some guidelines, and how will that interface with the homeless groups?
That's an excellent question. Right now, there are two ways into that site. We have access directly to Charlotte from an entrance beside West Harpeth Funeral Home, but you can't get back out of that site easily unless you turn right from there. The primary access for truck traffic will be through the existing Greenway Trailhead parking lot. Now that parking lot is used to serve homeless individuals. And so we want to keep it open so that we don't restrict the access of service providers. So we're going to try to coexist in that parking area. And then we'll have a gated area on the edge of that parking lot that allows our contractor to get access of the construction site. And then when he has trucks departing, can go through the trailhead parking lot and exit at the traffic light. So that area is going to be somewhat of a shared area. We're creating a safe zone for the individuals who live out there. Before you get to this orange marker is what we're going to call the unsafe area. So the homeless individuals have to not occupy that, and they have to be away from there when we get to the point in December that we start blasting through bedrock.
Okay, so Iran, you might have mentioned this, but when do you start this? I know you're doing the major work later, but when will that actually start?
We're going to start construction activities next Monday. We'll have the contractor on site to begin clearing the site and then begin installing a fence around the perimeter of his work area. So that's 3 to 4 weeks of work just to clear that and fence it.
And Judy, you might be able to, yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Then there'll be further site clearing to take out the larger trees. And then outside of that fenced in perimeter, which is the area that the contractor accesses, we'll clear about a 200-foot additional area. And that's the area that cannot be occupied when we actually reach the point of blasting in December.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much. Judy, just a quick question that came to my mind, and I got some questions that are coming. And if you came on late, let me know, but use chat to ask questions, and we'll surface those questions in a minute or two. Judy, a couple things. How is this being communicated? I believe to the homeless community is one, and two, one of the things that I was surprised of third parties and some of the nonprofits that help you quite a bit. So if you could touch base on those two comments, I would appreciate it.
Yes. So Metro Water Services reached out to me, and I do not have the exact dates, but it was end of June, early July that's going to be, there was no timeline that they had nailed down yet, but just giving a heads up. So at that point, I was not able to provide any timelines, but I reached out to the nonprofits that I knew were there regularly and just said pretty much what I knew. Something is coming up, stay tuned. As Metro has more information, we will immediately reach out. So I think it was beginning of August, and please, Ron, correct me if I'm wrong on that, where we really started to have more information on when the construction will start. At that point, we knew mid-September, and we told nonprofits that are actively working out there about that they can start giving people the heads up. There has been written communication and flyers handed out once the dates were more firm. And then actually this morning, and unfortunately I wasn't able to make it, but I think Ron was out there. There was a meeting with people who are in the encampment if they had questions, Metro Water Services and the contractor were so generous to be out there, giving their time, meeting with people. They had already had informal meetings before, like I think 2 weeks earlier prior, to meet people and talk to them, get their input and let them know what's coming, and just also building those relationships. And so this morning was an announced community meeting just for that community. And then the other questions, I actually see several members, often partners on here as well. I really appreciate all of you. So there are my team. So I have one street outreach worker, one direct service provider, and he's for the entire Davidson County. I'm in the process to see how we can restructure that so that we have a little bit more leverage. But what we do is we work very closely and coordinate with nonprofits, and including, and I know I will leave some out, so I'm always reluctant to list everybody. But in that area, Colby's Army is extremely active and has great relationships. The Mental Health Cooperative is out there on a weekly basis, I think more than once, to engage and work with people. Shower the People is out there, Neighborhood Health, the Salvation Army, and others as well. I think Open Table Nashville may not be in the encampment. They're in the area working with the people. They know the people. And it's really everybody, what we're doing as a community, we at the Homeless Impact Division provide some housing navigation training so that we have certain standards, and so people that people can, how can they access the services that are available. And this will help us get really ready for, as these dollars come in, to have people in the federal, meeting the federal requirements and get their IDs and everything ready once housing can start, and all that is in process right now. So we at the Homeless Impact Division, we couldn't do this alone. It's really, this is a heavy lift for nonprofits, partners, and they're doing fantastic jobs.
Thanks, Judy. And I got a note from India Pergarcher. I bet you butchered your name, India. She's one of the volunteers that goes out there, and when I hear their stories, the amount of work they do selfishly is pretty amazing. One of her suggestions, though, was to get a map for the homeless so they could see the safe and areas that may be less safe. So Ron, that might be an option. Might be a little bit easier and more visible for the homeless.
We actually posted and distributed maps today. So that's, we totally agree that's an excellent idea. And then we're going to put signage along the greenway that says, construction unsafe area. And then as it starts to clear, I think it'll become more clear about, where they shouldn't be. But the service providers out there are my new heroes. Judith and Troy at Metro Social Services, the Mental Health Cooperative, Colby's Army are.
You muted yourself somehow, I think.
Sorry about that.
That's right.
So we've placed maps out there. We're going to put additional signage. We're working with the service providers to help share that communication. And as Judith said, food is provided out there on Tuesdays and Thursdays about 11:30. That is the best time for us to meet with them because that tends to attract most of that population. So they've been really great to work with, and I think seem fairly grateful that we're trying to make a good effort to coexist out there.
Okay, thanks very much, Ron. In India, thanks for all you do. Appreciate the question. I'm going to start. There's a couple of questions here. And Judy, before I start the question, there's a comment I ditto. And Judy Tackett rocks. She is dedicated and works hard for the vulnerable residents. So hats off to you. It's a really difficult job trying to manage through this process. One of the questions is, and we see this a lot, who's responsible to clean up the area by Walmart? I happen to drive over that way a fair amount too, and notice that it's left pretty bad, and there's some better days, and then there's days where it really just accumulates. Judy or anybody that can help us, what's the process to keep it clean?
So one of the things that and nonprofits have done is like really looking at clean up with the people, you know, making sure there are trash cans out there. We have worked with Public Works to put dumpsters in the area. Frankly, we have also found that the dumpsters got full really quickly when used by clearly by neighbors and not, you know, to dump things. And so some of it has to do just to make an effort to go through and kind of pick up with people that live there, and also offer the dumpster space. So that's what we're trying to do. It's again an ongoing process.
Okay, thank you. One of the questions, where are you offering the homeless housing? And I know you and I have been talking about that, and that's the $1 million question right now for us.
Yes, and when you heard me, you may have come on a little late, but that's the big call. We really need to rely on, so there are these rapid rehousing dollars can also be used for long-term housing in motels, as long as there is a lease in place. So we're looking at every single opportunity that we can come by. We're looking at what do we need to do to centrally organize and support the service providers that are working with people with the landlord search. That's the discussions that are going on right now. But if anybody has leads, any lead, please email me, email Councilmember Druffel. We all need to just really look at every opportunity. And I'm just going to read these as they come. As a general matter, how long does it take to connect and transition into an individual into a housing unit? Did you get that right? Did you hear that, Judy? No, actually I didn't, and I don't see it either.
Yeah, it's
oh, no, there we go.
Yeah, as a general matter, how long does it take to connect and transition an individual into housing?
Yes, this is a long process, and you have to understand one of the things that right now, when I look at several programs, it's an average in Nashville, an average of 180 days, 120 to 180 days. It's not a quick process, and that's an average. What we need to do is, and what the goal is, to build to system where we shrink that time of that it takes to housing. The importance is that we all service providers, we agree, are always focused on housing, whatever services we provide. There's a continuation of landlord searches. We have more and more landlords that come on board, but it's also one of the things we need to understand when we look at homelessness is other systems usually have failed people at this point. People have fallen through the gaps, whether it's criminal justice system, whether it's healthcare, mental health care systems, whether it's a combination of everything. People accumulate very quickly debt through medical, underinsured. And then all of a sudden they find themselves in this dire situation. Job loss combined with a medical crisis can quickly lead to homelessness and spiral downwards. And then a lot of times we in the homeless system are then, looked at to fix the problem, and it's actually bigger. When we look at prevention, it needs to start upstream. It needs to start with other systems being fully funded. And I know they're doing the best they can, but it's also priority setting at the bigger level, frankly, at the federal level, that goes into all of this as well.
Good answer. Next question is, I know, and you might describe the history here, because It's called Brookmead Park at Kelly Point Battlefield. It was dedicated by the Metro Board of Parks in 2004 and was supposed to be a benefit to the Walmart development. The question is, why has Parks allowed this to become a huge homeless encampment? And how many other metro parks in Nashville have been allowed to get to this point? And I know there's some history here, Judy, in terms of trying to work in the past. Can you comment on that?
The only thing, I really am reluctant to comment on behalf of another department, but what I can say is we're working very closely with Metro Parks. We have worked in other locations with Metro Parks. The goal is always, what do we need to do to be realistic to get people into housing? And I think Parks is really looking at the utilization and doing the best they can as well. And are very open to working with everybody to get people assistance and still kind of find a balance. This is really difficult to find balance, and everybody is very concerned. I mean, the focus has to be on ending homelessness for people. That's really what the focus needs to be, and there is just no quick fix.
Thank you. Next comment is concern for security. The Old Hickory Place is leaving because one of their sales ladies was attacked. I'm not sure, and refused to show sheds anymore. Will this cause them to spread out over more neighborhoods?
So,
And Sergeant Rucker, you might be able to comment on this too.
Well, I mean, we don't know once this construction project takes off where they're going to go. You know, obviously, where they are currently, I mean, the resources that they have just available to them every day is abundant. You know, you have the exit ramp from the interstate where people give them money. You have restaurants that are, you know, I mean, they're very generous with food. You have supplies they can get from Walmart, Lowe's, to repair or build encampments. Once this project gets on the way, where they're going to go, we have no idea. You know, me personally, think they're going to continue to go with the river, someplace where they can continue to build their homes and kind of be left alone. But who knows? I mean, obviously, I see the question. The citizen is concerned about just the neighborhoods that surround that area. You know, Mr. Druffel, I mean, just being councilman just in your area, and Ms. Hauser, obviously continue to get concerns from citizens that live in your footprints with homeless situations. So it's just tough, man. We're going to see, I mean, just how many people can be safely placed in a residence or you know, a place they can call home. But where they're going to go, I mean, we won't know, man, until we actually cross that bridge.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
Commander Corman.
Hi, Commander, how are you, sir?
Fine. This might be for either Troy or Judy. When we look at the area that's going to be impacted, do we know how many residents live in that area? Because that would be some form of insight of, we're looking at 10 folks, we're looking at 15 folks that we're truly displacing. If they can't find space within the encampment itself, then like Ed said, they are going to move. And of course, concerned citizens or concerns are going to be inside their neighborhoods, and the dynamic changes even more. So Judy, do you know the answer to that question? Like how many are currently residing in the area that's going to displace folks?
Yes, it's 12 to 15, and I think it's already fewer now. People are starting to move. I peeked ahead to the next question, which kind of, if you don't mind, repeated how can it work itself out of here. It goes into where my mind is to quickly find spaces and direct people to acceptable temporary locations. If churches can actually, if somebody has churches or access to a church and can ask, and I'm not saying take groups but if anybody has a space that's available and work with a nonprofit, we can be creative, because one of the things that we just find is people do not want to go to shelter. We can't people force into shelter. We will not. That's not what we can't and we won't. But we encourage people to go to shelter. So what's an alternative when people just don't go to shelter? And I'm thinking if any faith-based community or anybody, any church out there can have some space for 1 or 2 people that we can work with, that we can link, we can really set up and talk to the church ahead of time how this could work. That could be possible ways to really see where people are. Also start building community for the person. I was out there last week, and one of the conversations I had, it was with one gentleman who really felt lost because his through COVID, his church is not having the services like they usually do, and he feels his community has really shrunk and fallen apart, and some of his supports, the emotional supports and spiritual supports, are just not as they used to be. So that's kind of a way that I think if anybody has connections to churches, to congregations, please have them reach out to me as well. Open to discussing possible temporary solutions there as well.
And her name, judith.tackett@nashville.gov, if you have the opportunity. I know one of the comments I think you made, Judy, along the way is if we did find a housing solution, you think that about 80% of the homeless right now would jump at the chance to look for a more secure place. Is that correct?
Yes, it's actually a lot of times people believe that once there's a relationship built, let's put it that way, and that's why nonprofits and outreach is so important. Once people actually trust and have an ongoing relationship, it's very rare that somebody wouldn't take a housing opportunity, and that's just the reality. So yes, the majority will want to go into housing and be part of the housing process.
Thanks, Judy. This is the next question, probably for you, Ron. Regarding the 2 tracts owned by Metro Water, is it the intent of the Metro Water to allow homeless to continue to occupy those tracts after the 2-year period of time, or how are you going to handle probably managing that space?
That's an excellent question, and it's probably, I guess, somewhat of a philosophical question beyond what I typically do. You know, our job is to, fix the problem, to lay out a project, to work with parks, to have a layout that's conducive to future utilization of that site. I don't think that I'm in a position to note whether or not we would force people out. I think that's a pretty unpopular concept, and that's why it's been so rewarding, I think, to have the social services outlets to allow people to find other ways to voluntarily leave those sites as opposed to being forced to leave.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's how we manage this is going to be very important. Number one is their safety. We're going into cold weather. We need to really, of course, be very sensitive to that. And, the one suggestion I would have is at church, because I think we all challenge ourselves, how do we do better, is maybe Judy identify some nonprofits. And again, I look at India, who, she came to the last meeting and had, I think, some good comments. They're the ones that are, right there with Judy, helping with the homeless. And maybe if you have a serious interest, Judy can help us identify those that as a volunteer you can get involved with. There's a late question, and I apologize. I think I had some technical difficulties with some of this getting in, etc. I apologize for that. If you got in late, please send something on chat if you have a question. I will tell you that this is recorded, so all this will be available. The comments from Judy, Commander, Sergeant Rucker, and Ron Taylor with water. The question is, when is they came in late, when is construction starting? So work starts Monday, if I understand Ron and correctly, and with more serious work more toward December, correct?
Correct. We'll start to begin clearing the site and fencing the perimeter of the construction site Monday. That process will probably take about a month, and then it'll be further clearing and removal of trash and excess soil. The contractor currently plans to begin blasting through rock starting in December, and then we'll be glad to provide further updates to the community about that schedule, because certainly, everyone I think wants to know in advance of when that occurs.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other questions that I find? See, it seems like it'd be a good opportunity to find a place for all the homeless in this encampment before the construction begins. I don't know if that's possible, but Judy, did you want to comment on that?
That's the focus. We don't distinguish between, that's the focus and the work.
Yeah,
on everybody.
Yeah, and the next question is, has the director of Metro Parks weighed in on this situation? And Judy's been in touch with Parks during this process for some time. And as I remember, Judy, on a couple occasions, you've tried to work to try to make, re-clear this into a park. Any history there that you can remember?
Yes, we have ongoing conversations. The director of Parks designated a contact person for us within Metro. So we all have all the departments that are relevant out there have established contacts with each other. So yes. Okay.
Any other questions? I know the more you talk to Judy, the more complex you understand. A couple learnings that I would take away that Judy told me is the housing solution. I mean, it gets complicated because there are some mental illness issues and other things that are going on. So when you do have a housing solution, you really have to allow some freedom within the homeless community. And it's a very long, progressive sort of improvement process to help many of the homeless. Anyhow, the more you look, the better, the more you realize how complicated this is. So, Judy, thanks so much for really joining us. I appreciate it. Appreciate your dedication. Ron, I know you got a lot going on. I appreciate it. You read India's mind in terms of having a map ready to go. Great job. And Commander Corman, thanks for all you do. I know this is not an easy because there's social issues with this. And then Sergeant Rucker, every time I see you at a meeting, everybody loves you. So thanks for everything you do. Okay, I just got one more question before we go. After I did all my thanks too. So we live on Davidson Road and are concerned about some of the homeless coming up on our road. There were a short period of time, few homeless camping under I-40 overpass as they started coming up toward Davidson. I know I had a conversation on that, and I think Ms. Tack had helped us. There's a couple of people helped us sort of take that extension and make sure that they were back more in the encampment area, so there was more consolidation. But any comments on that, Judy or Commander, in terms of them moving outside the encampment and up Davidson Road?
Can I speak out about Davidson Road?
Yeah, sure can.
I'm Susan Adcock. I'm the West Side Outreach Worker and Housing Navigator for Open Table Nashville.
Okay.
I wouldn't worry about people going too far from where they are now. They need food, they need bathrooms, and they need a little shelter once in a while. So they aren't really prone to move outside into people's neighborhoods. I know a lot of people worry about that, but that's just not a thing. Occasionally people do decide they'll go try to look for an odd job or something like that, but it's pretty innocent most of the time. I wouldn't worry about that.
Okay. And the next question, I guess, is who's responsible for enforcing homeless population if they were to move toward the neighborhoods, I guess Westmead neighborhoods? And Susan, or I mean, is there an enforcement component to sort of ensure, I guess, they don't move toward the houses? I'm not sure where that comes. Anybody willing to take that one on?
Foreman, I think it just goes back to, you know, and I don't mean to say this insensitive, but I think it's just a lack of understanding on both sides. You know, that maybe not both sides, maybe government side. You know, those that not involved, like Judy is. I mean, Tom and I, you and I have talked about recently how complex it is, and we had no idea. You know, I think the residents are probably a little concerned that they may come in the area, but you know, if whether it's a homeless person or anybody else that's on someone's property, that's private property, once they're warned to leave the premises, then, you know, it's on the property owner to go to the next course. You know, once someone's been warned, then there is the option of prosecuting them. But I think when we get down to it, you know, homelessness is not a crime. And I said this before, I do believe that it's not, and I think that we just need to educate ourselves the best we can. And sometimes people are just looking for something that they don't have that they need. I didn't catch the name of the young lady who was just talking from Open Table, but you know, maybe they are in the neighborhoods looking for an odd job, following up on something, or maybe they're just walking through the neighborhood. I would believe that, you know, I asked this question a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, where if they decided to relocate, do we think that they would want to stay in the same area? And Judy answered the question that yes, a lot of times they want to stay in the same area, which is supported by Open Table's comment that this is their community, this is where they want to be and stay, this is where they find most of their resources. Is that right, Judy? I mean, can you add on that, or the lady from Open Table?
Yes, and the other thing we also we're really looking at how can we then engage people better and have conversations, and the engagement process is kind of that's where the street outreach also works. Engagement process, get people connected to the services and talk to people about you know, what's going on. That's and we're also we have a really great police department right now that's very open to working with outreach with the community, with people experiencing homelessness, and it's like every other citizen that's out there walking on the street. I mean, that's about all I can say at this point.
Yeah,
I think the one thing that I would, I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is the hard part, is not knowing. The one I just got another question too is they're encountering some people that are homeless and that they're aggressive, et cetera. And I think the one comment, I think Commander or Judy, someone said, just make sure that if you're uncomfortable and it's near your house or whatever encounter, is to let Nashville Police know about that, so they can view that. I think if I understand this right, Commander, you see more on social media than you actually see complaints, and it's not like they want complaints, but they need to understand where the focus needs to be. I think a lot of times we're hesitant to necessarily make a complaint, but if it makes you uncomfortable and unsafe, it's probably important to do that.
I would agree. You know, and if I think what you just mentioned was, you know, people want to vent or have a discussion on social media, and if they truly are uncomfortable or fearful, they just need to simply call the police. We'll do our best to get out there. Likely a subject will probably be gone. But, we can hear their complaint, determine if we need to make a report, determine if we need to reach out to social services or any other component of the government to help someone out. I mean, the point is to have something that is dual in nature. Like, the complainant feels like there's some sort of resolution, as well as the person that they called in on, if we can provide some form of services for them.
Thank you. We're down to just the last minute. So again, thanks for Judy, Commander Ron, Sergeant Rucker, for all of attend. If you have emails or you have questions, just email myself. Council Lady Hauser is on here too. Please let us know. I'll let your council person, if you're not in our district, Thom, Druffel@nashville.gov, and we'll follow up with questions with Judy and whoever it applies to. But please let us know and let us know if there's an issue. But thanks for joining. Sorry for those that came in late and some of the technical difficulties. Our Chief of Staff, Rosie, helped me set this up, and I'm not always the best at doing this, but Rosie, again, thank you for helping me set this up. I plan on having more Zoom meetings. As an old guy, sometimes it's not your best way to go, but it seems like a safe way for us to get to go over some of these issues. Again, email me if there are any questions, and I really appreciate everybody showing up and having this discussion. Thank you very much.